Hi, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and welcome to the CineFiles. This week, we're going to be continuing our conversation from the last 2 weeks, which is Martin Scorsese. This is Martin Scorsese Chronicles Volume 3.
Part 3.
Yeah, Part 3.
Go to YouTube and put in CineFiles and enjoy.
Yeah, you can see a lot of footage from us, and of course on the MySpace page you can see our Ultimate Film Fanatic appearance. Anyway, but let's continue our conversation from last week, and we ended on The Color of Money, as we were just joking about, and this week we're going to continue with a movie that's probably Martin Scorsese's most controversial film. It was a film that he wanted to make for many, many years upon, I guess you say, upon one of his first films, Boxcar Bertha. So the film was in development for over 12 years. Financing was secured a few times and then pulled at the last minute because of the controversial content. The film is The Last Temptation of Christ, which, if many of you are not familiar with, every single talk show had a show on it about how it was a sin to go. There was protests, there was boycotts, and many places in the country refused to play the movie.
You gotta love a film that pisses off that many Catholics. Really.
Oh, it pissed not just Catholics off, but conservatives as well. I was at the time living in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'll never forget this. It was the first time I ever saw an ad. There was an Indian movie chain, like Indian, owned, and they said it had an ad for The Last Temptation of Christ.
Wait a second, Indian as in India or American Indian?
Like India overseas.
Okay.
And they were the only people in the place playing it, and it actually even had that in the ad. The only place in Memphis you will see this movie, and it was an ad. And I had to give them credit. I said, thank God Christians, if people are not Christian will finally play it.
Well, a lot of the Christians that dismiss the film hadn't even seen it.
Exactly.
Which is the usual conservative way out of things.
And the one thing that's interesting is the film is about temptation. It's about Jesus being tempted in the desert.
The controversy was actually, without giving too much away, the controversy was over a sequence which actually does not turn out to be what you think it is.
Yeah.
Just to play, because I don't
Or
want to
the
give anything
fact
away.
that Jesus is married at the end.
Yeah,
well, that's what it is, but the whole point. See, this is what was frustrating with this. Now we get into what the film is and all that stuff. This is why it's a good film. It's a good adaptation of the novel, but what's ironic about the whole thing. Look, I was born and raised a Catholic. I'm not a good Catholic. I don't go to church. Blah blah blah. But I was surrounded by that in my family, and so I have some knowledge of the Catholic faith and how important it is. But this is a very pro-Catholic movie. It's about
and a very pro-Jesus film.
A very pro-Jesus film.
I agree.
And that was so frustrating about those boycotts and those protests, that you just want to take those people and shake them and say, just see the movie, watch it, look at it. And
it's a very intelligent film.
It's a
too.
very
It's
intelligent
very
movie.
in depth, and it doesn't put the idea of faith on its ear, but it definitely makes you, whether you're of faith or of not of faith, it really puts a lot of things of what you believe and what you need to believe to make yourself feel better, or to
sacrifice.
Or sacrifice. It makes you re-examine a lot of things towards the end, especially with some of the speeches that the characters give. And Willem Dafoe's Jesus, a very, very a hell of a good performance. He is fantastic because Martin Scorsese said in an interview on television, he said, my Jesus is a tough guy. He's not a wimpy Jesus. This is not a turn your other cheek Jesus. My Jesus is tough. And that's how I wanted this character to be portrayed. It is ironic, though, that he originally cast Christopher Walken to play the role of
I could see
Christ.
that. I could see that. But I want to mention one thing. You're talking about pro-Catholic. This is something that I think is very important to mention, too. Martin Scorsese is an Italian Catholic who was actually studying to become a priest in the seminary, but left. He's a person I don't think that would make a movie that was blasphemous, especially his mother, who's a diehard Catholic. He would be ashamed to go home.
And it's not a blasphemous movie.
No,
at
it's
all.
not.
It's.
And it shows the most important thing, like we were mentioning earlier. People haven't seen this. It shows another problem with this country, and I don't want to get into huge politics about this, but people need to see things before they condemn them, because unfortunately, it was a great film, and it lost out a lot of business because of some boneheads when they don't see that it was actually a very positive thing. It wasn't just like a nothing movie that was like, we don't care. It actually had something positive to say.
That's the American way. Criticize it before you see it.
It's also one of the first films. I mean, we have to give credit to the book because it's actually the source material.
Yes.
I just wish I remembered the author. It's a very Italian name.
It's Nikos something.
Nikos Kazantzakis.
I think he's Greek.
I'm sorry, Greek,
something like that. But it's the first one that suggests that the Judas character actually wasn't a turncoat, that he betrayed Jesus because Jesus actually asked him to do that. and it was a sacrifice that he asked Judas to do for him. And Judas, like hemmed and hawed about,
Judas
but if I
played
do
by
this,
Harvey Keitel.
yeah, and if I do this, this is going to make me look bad. He's like, I know, but if you really love me, you would do this for me because I need you to do this for me. I need you to betray me.
And then I believe Harry Dean Stanton plays Job. I believe.
Does he?
Yeah. Because at the end, I remember Willem Dafoe comes up to Harry Dean Stanton.
Harry Dean Stanton plays one of the hoods that attacks Christ.
No,
and
he plays one of the apostles.
No.
Because he goes up to him and he says,
No.
He said, look, I don't want you.
It's obvious we haven't seen the film.
No. Harry Dean Stanton plays one of the guys that was hired to attack Jesus. And then later on, when after Jesus comes off the cross and decides to have that relationship with Mary Magdalena, that's when he runs into Harry Dean Stanton. But Harry Dean Stanton's changed. He's not the hood anymore. He's like giving himself over to,
And that's another thing we have to mention too.
Dick Miller?
And this
Yeah,
is
it
part
might
of the
be Dick
challenge
Miller.
that Christ, that Willem Dafoe's character faces.
But that confrontation at the end, I think, is one of the most powerful scenes in the movie.
Between him and Judas?
No, when he goes up to Harry Dean Stanton's character, who I thought was Joe, but I could be mistaken. When he says, "Hey, I'm just a man, and you really have to stop worshiping me and spreading my word and everything because I just want to live my life and I just want to be a man." And Harry Dean Stanton's character goes, "No, you don't understand. We don't need you. We need this ideal. People need this person to get behind, but we don't need you necessarily." And I thought that was very eloquent, very powerful.
Well, I want to say another thing too. It has a great performance too by Barbara Hershey as Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And that was Martin Scorsese's way of thanking her for introducing him to the book, which she gave to him on Boxcar Bertha.
Well, it was Jesus and Mary Magdalene's relationship within the film, as I think caused a lot of controversy.
And
that was the heart of it.
And also, I want another thing. I mean, not to change the subject on Scorsese. Another film which many people were protesting about. Anytime you have religion, it's controversial. Another masterpiece that was unfairly criticized was Monty Python's Life of Brian, talking about how Jesus' message was misinterpreted. By many people saying different things and other things, and actually had some very interesting and some good commentary on stuff. People don't see these films and they need to go see them. But anyway, the film is terrific. It's got a very beautiful cinematography. It's got a wonderful music score, I believe. And I believe it was by Peter Gabriel, if I'm not mistaken. And it's actually a very good piece of work.
And the DVD is wonderful. It's one of the Criterion's best put together DVDs.
And of course, Scorsese, I believe, sits in for a commentary. And
One of his very first commentary track he ever did on a DVD.
And that's another thing we have to mention. Whenever there's a commentary by Scorsese, be prepared to learn a lot. The man is a walking film school. All of his, I listened to his commentary for Raging Bull on the Criterion Laserdisc, which unfortunately is not on DVD. It is one of the most fascinating things I've ever listened to in my life. I learned so much about filmmaking in just those 2 hours by sitting with the man himself. I felt I was in the room just listening to him lecture. But
that documentary he did about the films that influenced him. They did on TCM.
American history.
A personal journey.
A personal journey.
Yeah, fascinating.
That was terrific. And I remember he was talking about this one scene, which we'll get into later, which actually will be his next film. He talks about it in that documentary. And he used he didn't copy, but he did a little homage to that scene. But Last Temptation of Christ, it's a controversial film. It might offend some because they don't want to watch it, but for those who do, they'll be rewarded with a terrific film.
We've talked so much about this. We might have to have a part 4.
Sorry, it's just I think it's a very good film, and it's probably one of the least known films in his catalog.
What's next?
Well, the next film, of course, is the one which
Last Temptation,
which is the one we were just talking about a little bit, which is GoodFellas.
You said Taxi Driver was his most famous. I think nowadays.
No, I didn't say missed. I said one of his least known in his catalog, The Last Temptation of Christ. It's just not many people have seen it.
From part 1 of our show, you said that Taxi Driver was the one that people probably identified most with Scorsese with. Taxi Driver. I think nowadays people most identify GoodFellas with Scorsese. I think that's his.
Do you really think so?
I think so.
I think so.
I agree.
Because I guess you could. I guess either way you could lean towards them because they're kind of level. Because they're both
But there was a lot of copycats.
I think GoodFellas is the one that because one thing GoodFellas put him back on the map.
It made
and when actually, he had a couple of flops.
It was a huge success. It got Oscar nominations across the board in every category.
And infamous for somehow losing to Kevin Costner's Dances with the
Wolves, which is another travesty
one of the biggest
and another unfair bias against New York filmmakers.
At the same time.
And also, it got Joe Pesci an Oscar, which he really deserved.
That was the only Oscar it
The
got, I
shortest acceptance speech ever. Thank you.
And
And
hey-
then he just walks off.
Hey, it's better than some of those speeches that are up there. And what can you say? Everyone thinks that the gangster film has been done to death because of The Godfather. However, Martin Scorsese took a real life story
Revolutionized it.
and changed it for good, and spawned so many copycats that everyone was. It seemed like the Sopranos would not be on TV today if it was not for GoodFellas. I am convinced, and in fact, half the people who are in GoodFellas are on The Sopranos.
And Scorsese had the balls to take a little-known actor that
Ray
put in a great performance in Jonathan Demme's Something Wild as a Psycho, and turned it on its ear, and I just knocked my microphone off. Turned it on its ear with this kind of everyman performance within the gangster genre, and gives a wonderful, wonderful performance. People talk about Joe Pesci, people talk about De Niro, but I think Ray Liotta, just as the witness to all this, and sometimes the
Hill
perpetrator as Henry Hill, is wonderful.
I think the other thing too is that it's got great performances across the board, even in the supporting roles. Like we were talking earlier about strong women. I think Lorraine Bracco is a
Wonderful.
very
A
good
wonderful
performance.
Wonderful.
And she is a tough lady, and you respect her. And there's a scene where you think that where she's attacked by a neighbor, and I love how she acts in this scene.
That was one of the best scenes.
That's one of the best scenes in the movie. It's a little small. It's a scene that you could cut it out. And it would wouldn't affect it. But somehow it just really adds to the character of Lorraine Bracco, and it's one of my favorite scenes.
As far as I know, our panelist here, Jeff, I think it's your favorite movie of all time.
Yes, it is. It's the film that made me want to go into filmmaking to begin with. It affected me so much the first time I saw it. I kept watching it over and over after seeing it. And the interesting, tidbit I found out about this film was the reason he made this film was because while he liked The Godfather, he said it was too polished. He grew up in an all-Italian neighborhood, and the gangsters he knew weren't exactly anything like the gangsters in The Godfather, who lived by a coda, had all these lavish things in their lives. It was more nickel and dime guys who had to hustle to get by. So he wanted to make a story that was more about the gangsters he saw growing up. And so when the book came out, he saw a little bit of himself in the story, and these were characters he could recognize. So that was why he made GoodFellas. And
to be fair, though, The Godfather, I love The Godfather. I think it's a masterpiece.
I'm not insulting it.
But The Godfather to me is more of a Hollywood 40s type film.
It's a
wonderful
romantic
film.
view.
It is a
Exactly.
romantic view. And the thing that I like about another thing that's great about GoodFellas, we're talking about his music again. This is the first time he went back to his use of music in a while. I mean, his other films were missing it for a little while. I mean, they were used, but not as well.
yeah, like Layla.
And of course,
Gimme Shelter.
I'm a huge Sex Pistols fan, and I think his version, the Sid Vicious version of My Way at the end credits with Joe Pesci, which is a little homage from an old black and white silent film with the person firing at the camera, is absolutely brilliant. And
That
it's
is
a wonderful montage at the end.
And it's also where we first get a taste of Scorsese using the Stones' "Gimme Shelter."
Yes, which he's used many times, and I
Countless.
never get tired of hearing it. Never get
Me
tired of
neither,
hearing it.
me neither.
Because it's such a wonderful atmospheric song with such emotion, and it works so well in all of his films.
Eric, what do you say on GoodFellas? Then we got to move along.
I think it's a brilliant film. Love it.
All right.
Every time it's on TV, I watch it.
Well, let's go on to his next film, which now that Scorsese had a hit with Goodfellas, which it wasn't the biggest box office hit, but it did very well. He got an offer from Steven Spielberg to make a very big commercial film, and it turned out to be my least favorite, and it still is my least favorite Scorsese film. The film is Cape Fear, which is a remake of the wonderful J. Lee Thompson film with Robert Mitchum,
Gregory Peck,
and I'm sorry, Martin Balsam.
Telly Savalas.
And Telly
Savalas.
Savalas. A terrific little black and white suspense film that was updated with Jessica Lange, Nick Nolte, Robert De Niro, and Juliette Lewis in one of her first roles. The film is about a lawyer who basically, I guess because it goes against his client and just
Because he knows his client is a bad guy, and he rather than defending him, he sets it up so that the client goes to jail.
And
Well, what's your problem with the film?
well, my problem with the film is that, well, it's structured too much like I don't want to say it's like a Nightmare on Elm Street film because that's ridiculous, but it's like a Friday the 13th film where the killer keeps coming back. They keep doing these ridiculous things to the person who should be dead. It's over the top and just ridiculous. I mean, especially the scene at the end on the boat. And De Niro's Southern accent, I lived in the South a long time, is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, I've heard better better accents on Hee-Haw. Than that
I would say that maybe you didn't understand the film then, what Scorsese was trying to do. Because the minute I saw a film, I left was like, wow. Because I am a fan of the original Cape Fear.
I love the original.
And this isn't meant to be a remake. It's meant to be a criticism. It's Martin Scorsese sort of like, well, let's take you through what happens in the original film, but let's put sort of like a skewered real-world perspective on it. For example, what the Gregory Peck character did was wrong. But you don't really see the guilt in that character, so he puts the guilt on Nick Nolte. Also, like, he takes all the original actors that were in all these great parts in the original Cape Fear and puts them in like these other parts. He makes Robert Mitchum the private detective, that great line, well, excuse me all over. You know, there's that.
Puts Gregory Peck in as the sleazy attorney.
He's a sleazy attorney.
And Martin Balsam is police, like an assistant police chief, something like I remember he helps him with a subject lineup or something.
Yeah, and it's the whole film is just meant to be this big like criticism of that kind of genre of film. That's why it's so hyperbolic. I mean,
to me, it really works.
That scene when Robert De Niro seduces what's her name?
Juliette Lewis. I didn't find that believable.
Is a incredibly hair-raising scene, I think.
I
so well performed by the both of them.
I didn't believe that scene for a moment. I had a problem with it. I don't know if it was the way it was acted or the way it was written. It's just, this is a girl that knows that this De Niro character is crazy, and she's still flirting with him and letting him suck her fingers.
I totally took it because it was a girl at adolescence. You know, the sexual hormones are raging wild. You don't know how to take it.
And to have that attention from an older man, even if it is a psycho. And also, it goes to play that her dad is warning her about this psycho. And what does a teenager do? Go against the parents' wishes. Mm-hmm. So, you know what it is? It takes everything that was in that genre, in that film early on, and magnifies it 10 times. That's what it does. And I think that's why it's enjoyable. You said De Niro's part was overbearing and over the top. It was over the top, but I thought it was enjoyable nonetheless.
Well, I want to mention one thing, though, because I want to move this along, but I do like two things about the cinematography by the great Freddie Francis.
Freddie Francis,
director
the Hammer films.
Of Tales from the Crypt, one of the greatest anthology films, and the cinematographer for Dune is incredible, as is Elmer Bernstein's readaptation of his original score.
Scorsese hired Freddie Francis because of the Hammer films.
And they're terrific, the ones he directed. And the look is great, it doesn't work.
What do you think?
I liked it.
Okay, that's the Jeff's recommendation. Well, we'll go
anything Scorsese.
We'll go on to another unusual film, and won't spend too much time on this one, but it's another unusual film in Scorsese's lineup. After years of doing two violent films back to back, he decided to do a love romance story with Winona Ryder and Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer, and the film is The Age of Innocence, which is a period piece. And Jeff, I can see you not too happy about it, so I'm going to give it to you. What don't you? I couldn't get through it. I'm sorry.
He's a great artist, a great man, but this isn't automatically. This isn't my favorite genre of movie. You know, A, period piece, and B, romance. Two things which I give him credit for at least attempting. And if I could have made it through the whole thing, I would say great. You know, I'm sure it's a great film, but I just it wasn't a good fit for me. But I'm not saying it's unwatchable, though. Just for me, it was unwatchable.
I like the film. I did not think I would like it at all. And one day I was like, you know something? Stop criticizing a film you haven't seen by the great master. Sit down and watch it. And I watched it. It's very watchable. I think it's good. Winona Ryder is the weakest link in that, but then again, you could say that about almost all of her performances.
But you do have Daniel Day-Lewis, who is a terrific actor.
Daniel Day-Lewis is wonderful. I think Michelle Pfeiffer is wonderful in it as well.
It's just not my type of genre. I don't know. I'm not criticizing it. It's just not for me, so I really don't feel free to comment on it. So I'm going to say, Eric, do you have anything?
I'm going to say it as an example of masterful filmmaking because his attention to period detail is phenomenal. Not just the ritual of that society in New York at the time. and you could tell that he had his research down.
And this is the 1800s.
And I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was a fascinating attempt to adapt a sort of a stodgy Jane Austen. Was it Jane Austen?
It's one of those
It's not Jane Austen.
It's
It
not
couldn't
Jane
have been Jane
Austen,
Austen.
It's
It was,
another famous type.
Yeah, what's her name who wrote Washington Square?
Oh, I know who you're
No, that's
talking
not. No, that's a guy. That's Henry James. Never mind.
about.
Anyway,
it's a chick flick, but to me, it's just
I don't
more
think it's
Scorsese.
necessarily a chick
I
flick.
wouldn't call it. I think it's a fascinating movie. I think it's one of the better period pieces made in the last 2 or 3 decades. I just think it's incredibly well filmed, incredibly well performed. Even Winona Ryder is good because of the part warrants that kind of performance.
And
anyway.
I will say, because of time, sorry folks, but we're not going to be talking a lot about Kundun.
But no, well, actually, that's not his next
Thank
film.
Okay.
But we won't be talking too much about it. We'll mention it because we have to skip over a lot of these because we don't have much time. But one film that I want to mention, this is one film that I really love, and I think it's one of Scorsese's most. It got very mixed reviews, and it's been unfairly criticized as being called Goodfellas in a Casino, and the film is Casino. Unfortunately, it had the problem of opening up the same day as the GoldenEye, which was James Bond's first film in 6 years, so many people went to see James Bond instead of Casino. And also Toy Story, I believe the original opened that day, so no one really saw it, and it didn't do that well. It's a very interesting little film. It's, of course, with Robert De Niro again, and Joe Pesci, and Frank Vincent, and Sharon Stone, and
James Woods.
who is very good.
Kevin
Joe Bob Briggs.
And that's
Joe Bob
right.
Briggs.
Evan
right.
Pollock.
Don Rickles.
Who's terrific. And it's
Tommy
big.
Smothers.
It's I can say Goodfellas
Frankie
type
Valli.
Atmosphere, right, in Las Vegas. I think, if you ask me, Scorsese's most beautifully shot film. I love the way the film looks. It really captures the gritty, the glamorous Las Vegas as well as the sleazy Las Vegas. And of course, there's a wonderful montages of music mixed with like there's a scene where you see the dice rolling in slow motion and you hear "Give Me Shelter" playing. Even though I will admit, "Tumbling Dice" should have played by the Stones because that would make more sound. But it's a terrific film, and Sharon Stone's best performance.
Yeah.
She
Yes.
is phenomenal. In fact, she steals the movie from De Niro and from Pesci.
Biggest shock of the
Well, I
movie.
think De Niro's performance is great because he completely underplays the role the whole time. Completely underplays the role, and I think that in and of itself is a genius.
Even Don Rickles is good in it.
Don Rickles, wonderful.
Sort of a tragic comic figure.
Joe Pesci does pretty much reprise his role from Goodfellas, but it was still entertaining enough to get through. I mean, and that whole his comeuppance at the end is probably one of the most violent scenes I've ever seen on film.
They actually made that more violent, actually intentionally, so that because they knew they'd have to cut it, so they actually put his head in a vice and you see his eyeball pop out. But they did that intentionally, and it worked.
Well, I'm talking about the scene at the end.
Oh, I mean that too.
Yeah.
They actually have it more violent. They said, and they actually did that intentionally.
He's still breathing. He's still breathing.
Well, we have 5 more films left, so let's go on to them. The next film, of course, is Kundun, which is a very unusual film, a biography about the Dalai Lama, which is not one of my favorites. But we're gonna.
It's funny. Somehow it's an amusing little film. You'd think it'd be ultra serious, but
it's not. It's okay.
An interesting take.
And then his next film after that, which is one that I'm going to give this one over here to Jeff here because I know this is one we all have disagreements on, and this is generally considered by most to be the weakest Martin Scorsese film. Even though Roger Ebert thinks it's one of his best, it's Bringing Out the Dead with Nicolas Cage.
Okay, that's why I automatically see that people badmouth it because it stars Nicolas Cage. Okay, first of all,
that's not why I'm badmouthing it.
I'm sure there are other reasons why people don't like it, but I like the film because I don't understand why people hate it so much. But I mean, you have great actors in it: Ving Rhames, John Goodman, Nicolas Cage at times. You have it's a compelling based on a book, and I found the story, and what I
found the story what?
I found it. It seemed to me a little personal to him in the filmmaking. I can't say how it's personal, but it just seemed like there were a lot of things in there that Scorsese was touching upon. Maybe it's the general depression of the main character, since Scorsese has notoriously gone through depression in the 80s and more in his drug-filled days. But that seemed very personal. And I don't understand why you guys hate it so much.
Because for what you just said, I felt the opposite. I felt that this film was his most detached from directing. I felt this was a paycheck for him. I did not feel that he was personally connected with this film at all.
I felt.
And Nicolas Cage's performance is one of the worst performances I've ever seen, which drives the film. He's almost in every single scene.
He's very bad.
And it's Nicolas Cage, who at one time was a very good actor, and I think he's kind of come back to that a little bit, but he had done such a string of garbage. The Rock, there's my phone now. The Rock, I don't know who's calling me
It's
now.
Nicolas
but,
Cage.
and it's set on a ring where it's just going to keep ringing and ringing. But we're going to ignore that. It's going to be like a porno movie where the phone rings in the background. But he had come from such a run of stupid, shitty movies like The Rock and what was it?
Con Air.
And just so much bad that he was getting used to acting again, and to see him overact because here he was getting used to it. It was an ugly performance. Patricia Arquette was a non-performance at all. John Goodman was very good. Ving Rhames was very good. But you cannot say in this part that the sum of the parts was better than the whole.
Unfortunately, we had to make this, I think, a part 4 and maybe a little addendum, but because we've run out of time again. But anyway, I've enjoyed these last 3 shows. I hope you guys have as well.
Here.
They've been a lot of fun.
It's all right.
The next time we'll be talking about Gangs of New York, The Aviator, and The Departed. And of course, we'll talk about a little bit more about Scorsese probably and fresh up about that. But anyway, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you for Martin Scorsese 3.5. Thank you very much. Good night. Roll the credits.
I could have tried to bring out the dead a little better.
Well, we can do that for the next show.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. We can do it because we can. I can.
Maybe
cut
I'll
this.
see it by then.
I'm going
This
to
is the only
rewatch.
Scorsese I haven't seen.
I'm going to rewatch it. Like, I can't believe you.
Okay.
I can't believe
Just
my
help me get
phone
these.
went.
Just help me get these chairs out quickly because they told me I had till 10:30.
What time is it now?
10:05. So the people
I
waiting.
thought when you told me